You know those moments that hit like a slap before you even register the sound? That was tonight. We were halfway through a casual little wine party Ellie had thrown. Just a few couples from the neighborhood. Some old friends. Easy laughter, low lighting, jazz playing soft through the speakers. It should have been nothing more than a forgettable evening. And yet, I'll remember it for the rest of my life. I was standing by the kitchen island, chatting about hiking trails with Tom from down the block, when I noticed Ellie, my wife of 7 years, practically glued to Drew's side. Drew, my best friend since college. The guy who helped me move into our first apartment. The guy who toasted at our wedding. And there he was, whispering something that made her laugh a little too hard, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek like they were in some sappy Netflix drama. Her hand lingered on his arm. Way too long. Something in my stomach twisted. I knew Ellie. Knew that laugh. That was the one she saved for seduction, not for neighborly banter. So I walked over. Calm. Controlled. Ellie, I said, voice low, can you tone it down? People are noticing. She blinked once, then tilted her head like I'd just told her she couldn't breathe. Tone what down, Marcus? Her voice was syrupy sweet, but her eyes flashed. Having a little fun? I nodded, trying to stay composed. It's not about fun. It's about respect. And that's when it happened. Without warning, she lifted her glass of red wine, still half full, and threw it straight at my face. The cold splash shocked me more than the stain soaking into my shirt. The room fell dead silent. I stood there, dripping Cabernet, while gasps echoed around us like tiny earthquakes. Then Ellie stepped closer, voice rising like she wanted the whole party to hear. Maybe if you weren't so boring and insecure, I wouldn't have to find my fun elsewhere. And she walked out. Just like that. The front door slammed behind her, and the only thing louder than the echo was the buzzing silence that followed. I didn't move. Didn't wipe the wine from my face. Didn't say a word. People avoided my gaze, some pretending to fiddle with their drinks, others exchanging uncomfortable glances. Drew had vanished, probably chasing after her. I just stood there, alone in a room full of people, humiliated. I used to think betrayal would come with warning signs, late nights, cold shoulders, a missing spark. But this was a public declaration. A torch tossed into everything we built. And the worst part? I wasn't even angry. Not yet. Just numb. Because this wasn't just about a fight. It was about realizing that the person you trusted most might have already stopped seeing you as someone worth protecting. Ellie knew what that stunt would do to me. She knew my job depended on respect. She knew I hated scenes, but she wanted to hurt me. And she succeeded. I kept the party going a few minutes longer, forced a smile, made a vague joke, and then excused myself. The wine dried into my collar by the time I reached my car. The city lights blurred as I sat behind the wheel, staring ahead. Everything about my life looked the same on paper: steady job in commercial design, a neat little house in the suburbs, 2 cars, an overly friendly golden retriever named Moose. We'd been the picture of predictable middle-class peace. But something snapped tonight, and I knew this was just the beginning. What would you do if your whole identity cracked open in front of everyone? Because I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story, not by a long shot. The strangest thing about betrayal? It's how quiet everything gets afterward. Ellie didn't come home that night. She didn't call, didn't text. Just vanished like the glass of wine she'd hurled at me had washed her off the hook for decency. And yet by morning, there she was, at the kitchen island, sipping coffee like she'd spent the night doing yoga with monks. Morning, she said, without looking up from her phone. Her voice was calm. A little too calm. I paused in the doorway, studying her. She was dressed like she always was for a lazy Sunday. Oversized cardigan, bare feet, hair twisted into that effortless knot. You'd never guess she'd detonated our marriage in front of 20 witnesses. You sleep okay? She asked. That was the moment I realized something had shifted. Not just in her. In me. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even pretending to be. No apology, no regret, just a cold, dismissive return to routine. And I didn't explode. I didn't demand an explanation or shout her name so loud the neighbors would peek through their blinds. I just nodded. Yeah, great sleep. She finally looked up. There was a flicker in her eyes, like she'd expected something else from me. Anger, maybe, begging, but I didn't give her that. Instead, I pulled a mug from the cabinet, poured my own coffee, and sat across from her in total silence. We sat like that for minutes. The clink of her spoon against ceramic was the only sound in the room. She finally broke. You embarrassed me last night. I laughed. Just once, and not kindly. You embarrassed yourself. Ellie bristled, but didn't argue. Instead, she turned it all around, like flipping a mirror and demanding I apologize for what I saw. You've been controlling Marcus. For years. Watching what I wear, judging my friends. You act like a saint, but you've always been. Stop, I said, flatly. Just stop. She pressed her lips together, drawing in a sharp breath like she was the wounded one. That was the new game. She'd gone from attacker to victim in less than 12 hours. Now, she was icing me out, floating around the house like she was walking through fog. No eye contact, no warmth. But every so often, she'd toss out a vague accusation, how I'd made her feel small, how I never let her breathe. And I could have fought that. I could have defended myself. But instead, I just watched her. Watched how she avoided mirrors. How she jumped every time her phone buzzed. How she locked the door when she went for her showers. Ellie was laying bricks on her own wall now, higher and higher each day. And I let her. Because I wasn't chasing this version of her. Not anymore. 3 days after the party, I got a text that stopped me mid-stride at the hardware store. Drew, can we talk? Just us. Please. I stood there, holding a box of nails in one hand and my phone in the other, frozen between rage and curiosity. I didn't reply right away. I didn't trust what I'd say if I did. But later that evening, I found myself walking into a small coffee shop near downtown. One of those quiet places with dim lights and baristas who look like they write poetry between espresso shots. Drew was already there, hunched over a black coffee, his face pale and drawn. His leg bounced under the table like he was counting seconds. The moment he saw me, he stood, then thought better of it, and sat back down. I didn't say anything as I approached, just slid into the seat across from him. He looked like a kid who'd broken a window and knew the belt was coming. Marcus, he started, then paused. I messed up. I let the silence stretch. He needed to sit with his guilt. She said it didn't mean anything. He finally blurted. Said it was just a couple of nights. One during a conference. Another when you were visiting your sister. She told me it was over between you two. That you were sleeping in separate rooms. That she was done. The words landed one at a time, like bricks in my chest. I didn't flinch. Didn't speak. Just stared at him. He looked down. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. I'd had too much to drink both times, and she made it seem like we were just helping each other escape something broken. That true? I asked. That you were drunk? Or just easier to forgive yourself that way? He winced. Maybe both. The honesty caught me off guard. For the first time since the party, I felt something other than fury. Disgust, yes, but also a strange kind of calm. You still seeing her? I asked, voice even. Drew shook his head violently. No. God, no. After that night, I couldn't even look at myself. And after what she pulled at your place, I knew I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I sat back, fingers tracing the rim of my cup. He leaned forward, desperate. Look, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I had to tell you. You deserve to know the whole truth. He expected a punch, maybe a walkout, but I didn't give him that either. Instead, I asked, you want to make it right? He blinked. What? You regret it? I said, you want to fix even a shred of what you broke? He nodded slowly, unsure of where this was going. Then help me, I said, because I have a feeling this wasn't a one-off. Ellie's still hiding things, and I want to see just how far it goes. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was loaded. Drew stared at me for a long beat, then slowly extended his hand across the table. Okay, he said. I'll help you. We shook, quietly. Two men who once trusted each other, now bound by betrayal, guilt, and the first steps of something that looked an awful lot like justice. To the outside world, it looked like Ellie and I were mending things. We had dinners again, silent ones, but shared. She started leaving the house in makeup again, humming to herself like nothing had ever happened. I complimented her cooking. She laughed at my jokes. We even walked moose together once or twice, like two people rediscovering common ground. But every word from me was rehearsed. Every glance had weight. Every silence had a purpose. Because behind the scenes, I was laying the groundwork. The first thing I did was visit a lawyer. Not one of those billboard types with loud ads and louder ties. This one worked quietly out of a downtown office. The kind of guy who filed everything with precision and discretion. He gave me a roadmap, what I'd need, how to protect myself, how to gather evidence without crossing legal lines. And as I signed the initial paperwork, I felt it. That icy clarity I hadn't tasted since before the party. This wasn't about vengeance. This was about dignity, about reclaiming control, inch by inch. Meanwhile, Drew played his part. He texted Ellie one afternoon, casually, like they hadn't imploded a friendship and a marriage. Said he'd been thinking about her, that he missed their connection, that maybe they should talk. Ellie waited 4 hours before replying, probably trying to decide which version of herself to use. But by that evening, she'd said yes. Agreed to meet. Drew suggested his place. Said it'd be safer, more private. She didn't even hesitate. The trap was set. On the day she was supposed to meet him, Ellie spent extra time getting ready. I watched from the hallway as she tried on 2 different dresses before settling on something effortless, but only on the surface. Lip gloss, heels, the perfume I bought her last Christmas. She thought she was the one controlling the story. She had no idea I was already at Drew's place, tucked behind a curtain in the spare room, camera rolling silently. The room had been carefully staged, just 2 glasses, low lighting, soft jazz humming in the background. Not romantic, not sleazy, just ambiguous enough. Drew played it perfectly. He greeted her like an old friend with a lingering history, and Ellie walked in with a kind of carefree arrogance that made my stomach tighten. She laughed easily, tossed her hair, crossed and uncrossed her legs like she was back on stage. And the whole time, I watched from the shadows. No anger, no outburst, just focus. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't rage. It's the calm before the truth comes crashing down. At first, I thought she'd jump right in. Ellie sat down across from Drew, her legs crossed like she owned the space, swirling her wine like she'd done it 100 times. And maybe she had. They started with small talk, Drew mentioning old memories from college, Ellie laughing at a joke that wasn't funny. It was performative, flirtatious. I could almost hear the script she was rehearsing in her head. But then, something shifted. Drew brought up the night of the party, his voice low, almost regretful. "You really went off on Marcus," he said, eyes scanning hers. Ellie gave a tight smile. "He's been smothering me for years. That night just broke the dam." And then she hesitated. That pause, just a breath too long, wasn't part of the plan. "I keep thinking about it," she added softly. "Not the wine, not the drama, just what I lost." She leaned back, her fingers tracing the rim of the glass. "I know I messed up," she continued, voice quieter now. "And not just with Marcus. Maybe with you too." Drew played along, tilting his head. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked toward the window like something outside held the answer. "I've been so sure of myself for so long," she whispered. "But lately, I don't know. I don't know what I want anymore." That wasn't in character. Ellie never second-guessed. She manipulated, twisted, pivoted, but she didn't reflect. And now? She sounded almost human. Almost. But I didn't buy it. Because the truth was buried in what came next. "I thought I missed Marcus," she said slowly. "But what I really miss is the version of me that he used to believe in. The girl who didn't need to flirt to feel seen." Drew stayed silent. "So did I. I don't think I can get her back," Ellie added. And then, just like that, she slid her hand across the table and covered his. Whatever hesitation had stirred in her, it wasn't enough to stop the momentum. Not enough to choose truth. Not enough to stop lying. I captured it all. The touch, the look, the implication. I didn't need a kiss. I didn't need a confession. Her choices were louder than either. When she finally left that evening, I waited a few minutes before stepping out from behind the curtain. Drew didn't say anything as I packed up the camera. He looked tired. Older. "She's confusing," he murmured. I nodded. "She's whatever she needs to be. That's the problem." The footage was clear. No theatrics. No forced drama. Just 2 people playing with fire, and one of them still pretending not to smell the smoke. I didn't feel triumph as I drove home. Just silence. And the kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from work, but from holding in every word you wanted to scream. But I knew one thing as I slid the memory card into my safe that night. The truth was no longer something I needed to find. It was something I already owned. I didn't slam the door when I left. Didn't throw a suitcase down the stairs. Didn't demand she come out from whatever room she was hiding in. I didn't even leave a note on the fridge. I just folded the papers, placed them neatly on the kitchen counter, and tucked a single sheet underneath them. 3 words. That was all. You know why. Ellie wasn't home. She'd left earlier in the day. No explanation, no update, maybe out with friends, maybe just avoiding the house she'd already set on fire. It didn't matter. The place already felt hollow. Like my presence had been erased weeks ago, and I was only now catching up to the truth. I grabbed my keys, took one last look at the living room, the photos we never updated, the wine stains still faint on the carpet from that night, and then walked out. No dramatics, no performance, just silence. Court was surprisingly quick. She showed up with her usual polished calm, hair done, heels clicking sharply on the marble floor, sunglasses she didn't remove until we sat down. I half expected her to bring tears, turn the tables, claim to be the victim of a cold and withholding husband. But she didn't say a word. Not one. She looked over at me exactly once, just long enough for me to see that she knew the battle was already lost. My lawyer presented the footage. Not in full, just the right pieces. Her voice, her hand, her ease. A betrayal so subtle, so measured, it left no room for argument. Ellie didn't object, didn't blink. She just stared straight ahead like she'd decided it was easier to drown quietly than make waves trying to stay afloat. And maybe, in her own twisted way, that was her apology. The judge awarded me the house, the property, even the dog, Moose, who she always claimed to love but never actually walked. When it was over, Ellie stood, adjusted her blazer, and walked out without a glance. That silence, heavier than any yelling match, was her final act. Not of rage, not of regret, just resignation. And it hit me then. For all her dramatics, Ellie never truly fought for me. Only for control. And the moment she realized she'd lost it, she vanished. Later that evening, I sat on the back porch, the one I'd stained myself 2 summers ago, with Moose curled up beside me and the sound of distant traffic humming like static. I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty, but not broken. That weight, the one I'd carried for months, the constant wondering, second-guessing, trying to fix what someone else had no intention of saving, it was gone. In its place was something unfamiliar but welcome. Peace. And I realized I hadn't lost anything. I just stopped holding on to someone who was never really mine. It didn't take long for Ellie to make one last move. About a month after the court ruling, just when I thought the dust had finally settled, she texted me out of nowhere. Can we talk? Not, hello. Not, how are you? Just that. I didn't answer right away. I stared at the message for 10 minutes, weighing nothing and everything. Part of me thought I should ignore it. The other part wanted to know what version of herself she'd show up with this time. We met at the same coffee shop where Drew had confessed. Funny how full circle moments never feel satisfying in real life, just eerily quiet. She was already seated when I arrived. Same dress from our last anniversary dinner. Too symbolic to be accidental. Thanks for coming, she said, offering a smile she'd perfected over the years. The one that looked warm but never quite reached her eyes. I didn't return it. She jumped in fast. I've been doing a lot of thinking. About everything. About you. Of course she had. And about Drew, she added. Her eyes flicked up, watching me like a hawk searching for signs of softness. He's not who I thought he was. He manipulated me. There it was the shift. From confidence to confession. From certainty to spin. I leaned back, fingers wrapped around my coffee. He helped show me who you are. Her smile faltered. Just slightly. But it was enough. Ellie tried to recover. I never meant to hurt you, Marcus. I was confused. Lonely. You shut down a long time ago. I didn't bite. You threw wine in my face at a party. Slept with my best friend. Lied for months. And when it all came down, you stayed silent in court. She looked down then. For once, no comeback. I thought maybe, she said quietly, we could still start over. That was her last card. The rewrite. The revisionist ending where I take her hand and we pretend none of it happened. I stirred my coffee once, then pushed it aside. I've already started over, I said. A week later, I met Drew at the bar down the street, one of those low-key neighborhood places with sticky tables and unbeatable wings. He was already there, sipping a light beer, laughing at something one of the bartenders said. When I walked in, he raised his glass. And there, seated beside us, 2 new women, new conversations, light banter, was a moment I hadn't expected. Freedom didn't feel loud. It felt easy. At one point, I caught movement outside the window. Ellie. She was walking past in a blazer and heels, pretending not to see us. But she saw. Of course she saw. Her eyes flicked toward our table, then quickly away. She didn't stop, didn't wave. She was alone. I turned back toward the bar, and Drew cracked another joke. The women laughed. I laughed too. Not because I was over it, but because I was finally okay with not needing to be. The past was a weight. But now? Now it was behind me. And for the first time in a long, long time, I was finally walking forward.